All right. Hello, Rohan Pinto, Chief Technology Officer and co-founder of One Cosmos. Welcome to the One Cosmos vlog.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. In fact, I love the Mike and Mike show that you used to do earlier. I guess it's my turn now.
It'll be the Mike and Rohan show. But I got to tell you, I'm not used to seeing you with pink hair. Did you?
Oh my. Oh my. Yes. Yes. So I mean, we've all been working from home for a very long time. I know the things in the US are much better, but out here in Canada, I'm based out of Toronto, and out here in Canada, we are still under strict stay-at-home orders. And it's been getting to everybody. And we are all humans, and it's been getting to me and my kids as well. And my daughter just started a few days ago saying that we have tried doing everything to keep ourselves entertained, from playing ping pong at home or have little game parties, playing cards. And she said, hey, you know what? Let's do something different. And she thought it would be a great idea to color my hair. And I thought it would be a great idea to let her do that. So I now have pink hair.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, clearly you're a great father. I did that. Well, I didn't do that. I took my daughter once to a nail salon. I had my toenails done, but you see, I could wear shoes, so nobody knew. But it was a great.
Yeah, my safety net is that we are under strict stay-at-home orders, so I don't have to go out and meet anyone. Well, I did go out to the grocery store and got a couple of weird looks from the cashier, but you know what? It's all fine and dandy.
I like it. You look amazing, so you might stay with it. But listen, on the serious side, I wanted to talk to you about our platform. It's an amazing platform as I've come to know it. I'd like to know from you. So start with what problems did you set out to solve when you architected this platform?
When we see, the thing is that the platform has gone through a huge cycle of evolution over the last 3 years since the platform was initially launched. Now, when we launched the platform around 3 years ago, the intent was to help consumers. Securing and to give them control over their own identity, and also make things easier for them. Now, we did not know at that point in time that we are going to be in a pandemic and everybody's going to be working remotely and nobody's going to go and meet someone face to face. But the whole idea at that point in time was to leverage technology to enable consumers to go and verify themselves and build a verifiable credential that they could then leverage to access services that require a very high level of assurance. For example, banks are mandated to go through a whole identity verification process before they let a person open up a bank account, where you got to also go and verify that the consumer is a resident of a specific country, lives at a specific address, has a valid identity document. And we said, hey, you know what? We could leverage bleeding edge technologies like the blockchain and the capabilities that we have today on mobile devices to allow a consumer to go and create that verifiable credential so he could go out and open a bank account remotely online, for example. And then we realized that the technology platform just doesn't apply to consumers. It applies to enterprises as well. Because if you look at the whole onboarding process of an employee, you really have to go and verify whether the employee graduated from a specific university. You got to go and verify whether his educational credentials are actually valid. And the process today takes anywhere between a few days to a couple of weeks to verify an individual. So we thought that the whole idea of being able to verify an individual using technology within a few minutes would bring a lot of value to not just the consumer workspace, to the consumer's side of the equation, but to the workspace as well, to allow them to onboard employees onto their HR platform. And then the whole platform took another big turn because it was so advanced in terms of the ability to verify an individual. We could then leverage that same identity to go passwordless and access workforce and enterprise applications without having to deal with the complexity and the problems that revolve around passwords.
That's fair.
And here we are with a platform that not only does identity verification, it also does passwordless access to systems and desktops and web applications, and it also does biometrics.
Mm-hmm. That's fascinating. So it was the intersection of identity and authentication that kind of drew my attention. And you have these identity proofing companies, and then you had the authentication companies. But it was the combination that made it interesting. And you mentioned banking, and certainly, with the know your customer, it's absolutely essential in the United States, at least, that if you're going to open a bank account, that you prove your identity.
Who you are.
But how would you describe the ideal customer for this type of technology?
When, like I said earlier, the ideal customer would be consumers, because it's all about consumers having the ability to prove themselves and go and access online services. Now, while I say that the consumer side of the equation is an ideal customer base, it's a very hard problem to solve, because you can't convince the entire population of the US, for example, to go and use a platform to access a service, whereas the service that actually consumes that identity does not exist. So if you look at it the other way around, it's enterprises that actually provide you a service. So the our thought process changed along the way of saying the actual ideal customer is an enterprise that provides a service. An enterprise like a bank and they need to acquire consumers. So if a bank offered a service like a remote account opening, or if a telco provided a service like a passwordless authentication system into any of your application, that would be the most ideal scenario, where you not only have a service that organizations or enterprises offer to the consumers, but consumers also have a way to very quickly identify themselves, verify themselves, and avail themselves of a service in a much more easier and secure fashion.
That's interesting. What I found interesting, it's the graduated levels of identity proofing that we could introduce for different employees or categories of employees or customers, with really just a flip of the switch that I found really fascinating. That it wasn't a redeployment, it wasn't some kind of a custom configuration. It's basically deploying the level of identity proofing that was appropriate for that use case with one.
Absolutely.
So I've come to learn about the standards in our industry, the 502 standard, the NIST 863.3, the W3C standards. Why should anybody care that we're certified on these standards, and very few others are?
That's a great question. Now, I wouldn't want to dive into the specifics of what the NIST 863.3 standards really mean, or what it brings to the table, or what the W3C verifiable credentials really mean, or what 502 really means. Yes, we are not just compliant with standards, we are actually certified. And there's a huge difference between a product or a service that's compliant versus a product or a service that's actually certified. When you say that it's compliant, you hope that it does what it's supposed to do. But when you're certified, you know that it actually does what it's supposed to do. Now, here's why standards are really important. Have you heard of this term called being hauled into a walled garden? Organizations typically have a mentality, or they have a process, or they have a system or a platform where customers or enterprises get sucked into a walled garden, which means that every solution that you deploy, every little product that you deploy has to be from the same vendor, and you don't really interoperate with other vendors or with other platforms. Adhering to standards would assure you that an enterprise that deploys any product that is certified and adheres to standards will interoperate with all other vendor products that might be out there. So you can actually say, I'm going to use the passwordless authentication service from OneCosmos, but you could also have the liberty to deploy a identity verification service by someone else altogether, rather than putting yourselves into a situation where every little product, every little service has to be bought in from the same vendor. It actually opens your doors and gives you the opportunity to pick and choose the services and the products that you want. And it also gives you the opportunity to pick and choose the vendors that you would want to within your organization. Now, having said that, I would love it if they use our products for all their services. But again, giving customers the liberty of picking and choosing what they want from whom they want is as important as a user knowing who you are, what you are, and where you are.
That is so cool. That is so cool. So you architected a distributed ledger into the platform, and you selected Ethereum as I guess the blockchain of choice. Why did you make these two choices? Why a distributed ledger? Why Ethereum?
Okay, so let's talk about distributed ledger for a moment. Here's what distributed ledger brings to the table. When you're talking in terms, or when you're referring to something like a verified identity, where I state that I am Rohan, my last name is Pinto, I'm based in Toronto, and I'm going to turn 50 very soon. Now, if this information sits on some kind of a centralized database, you have to trust the organization that owns the database, or you need to trust the administrators of that infrastructure to not go and tamper with that data and say, well, when Rohan's identity was initially created, it said Rohan Pinto, but some administrator went in there and changed it to Rohan Sishon. We know what happened with Edward Snowden at the NSA. When you have access to databases that have critical information, people can tamper with it, people can modify it, people can change it, which leads to multiple personas of the same individual being out there in the black market or on the dark web. I wouldn't want to go and even try and look at the number of personas being sold on the dark web as of today. I mean, identities are being bought and sold by the minute. Now, having some kind of a system that would give you the assurance that once you have your identity data stored there, it can only be accessed by the individual who owns that data, and that data can never ever be tampered with, is a huge value. So when we built the platform, we kept a couple of things in mind. The first thing we had to keep in mind is to build it with security and privacy from the ground up. Now, it's very difficult for any existing product to embed security and privacy into their existing ecosystem. But we had the advantage of going greenfield and building the platform from the ground up. So we ensured that whatever we did kept security and privacy at the core of its infrastructure. So anything and everything that we build on top of it automatically derive the benefits of security and privacy by design. And in fact, privacy by design is one of the principles that was advocated by the Privacy Commissioner of Ontario, who I admire a lot, Dr. Anne Kaulakian, also because I live in Ontario. So we incorporated her principles into the very core of our ecosystem. Now, the platform itself is blockchain agnostic, which means that we can run our platform on any blockchain of choice. However, our drug of choice, I like to call it a drug of choice, is Ethereum because of a couple of things. One is having a private Ethereum network that uses an algorithm like proof of authority enables us to conduct way many transactions on the blockchain than be limited to a normal public blockchain. The other huge advantage that Ethereum brings to the table is the advantage of deploying smart contracts. So think about smart contracts as a computer program that can never be modified. If a program was written to take A as an output and give you A as an input and give you B as an output, it would always do that. And because this program is deployed on a blockchain, you can have the assurance that that program will always do exactly what it was designed to do, and it cannot be modified by anybody to give you and manipulate the results in any form. Hence, the blockchain adds a lot of value. It also serves as an immutable audit trail. So you know that the person who logged into your desktop is the same person who logged into a web application, who's the same person who conducted a transaction on an online application. And since it's immutable, there's no way to refute that. So while blockchain has its advantages, Ethereum also had a huge bunch of advantages over all the other flavors of blockchains that were out there. And hence we chose Ethereum. But having said that, we do have the ability to run on top of Hyperledger Indies, Hyperledger Aries. We can run on top of the Bitcoin blockchain as well, R3 Corda, or even JP Morgan's Quorum.
Okay. But we know that Ethereum takes gas, and I know that gas is getting very expensive. It cost me $4.90 the other day to fill up the car. So isn't this going to get cost prohibitive?
Okay, before I get into cost prohibitive, It's funny that you asked me that question because I was talking to my son a few hours ago and he said, "Hey, Dad, what are you going to get me for my next birthday?" And I said, "What do you want? You got your PlayStation, you got your video games. I just got you a Nintendo Switch the other day. So what do you want for your next birthday?" And he, in fact, helped me build one of my first mining rigs that's still running in my basement. So he's been very interested in this whole cryptocurrency space. And he says, "Hey, Dad, why can you give me a Bitcoin?" And my first response to him was, "Why would you want $15,000 for? Wait, hold on a second. That was $16,000. But what are you going to do with $14,000? And the whole point is that it's so volatile, it fluctuates so much that it can go from very cheap to very expensive within a matter of minutes. Now, having said that, one thing I'd like to point out is that our blockchain is not the public blockchain. Okay. It has got absolutely nothing to do with Ethereum and the cost of Ethereum or the cost of Bitcoin. We have got absolutely nothing to do with cryptocurrencies. Yes, our blockchain also uses gas, and gas is a way to go and validate transactions. It's a cost that you pay to validate transactions in the blockchain. But because of the way we have built our permissioned ledger per se, we also use gas. But think about gas in our world as monopoly money. It's got no correlation to the US dollar or any other what we call as fiat in the normal world. So it's got no correlation to fiat or real money. It's just a factor that plays a role in validating the transactions that go onto the blockchain, and it's got no dollar value to it at all. So it's never going to get expensive. Right. The other interesting aspect of using a private ledger is that when you set up a private ledger, you got something called as a boot node, which actually goes and creates X number of ether or X amount of gas. And every time a transaction goes through, you pay X amount of gas to the creator. So you never run out of gas in our ecosystem, and we can run an infinite amount of transactions because we pay ourselves ether or gas to conduct those transactions, and we reward ourselves ether or gas for validating those transactions.
Okay. All right, but just for people listening, just to be clear, this is not the gas we put in our automobiles. This is a different kind of gas, just to be clear. Okay.
Yes, and it's got nothing to do with cryptocurrencies. This is not the Ethereum that people talk about. This is not the public network, and it's got no correlation to, or it's got no dollar value at all.
Okay, well, I do want to talk to you about cryptocurrencies, but I've been warned not to do that because it's a long conversation. So I'm going to do that offline. I do want to ask you about the guidance, any guidance you might have for anybody that wants to bone up on distributed ledgers or blockchain. I know that Kupinger Cole and Annie Bailey has written a few things about sovereign identity. And blockchain. Are there any other resources that you might guide people to that want to bone up on this area?
Yeah, absolutely. It's great that you brought up Kupinger Cole and Anne Bailey, because she has got fantastic articles and publications out there that talk about privacy, that talk about security, that talk about blockchains and what blockchains do. And she also talks about identity management and identity verification and stitches them all together into this perfect story that gives readers a very clear understanding of what blockchains bring to the table and what verifiable credentials or verified identities bring to the table and how they play together with each other. But there are a couple of other things that I would recommend the viewers to also go and read up on and catch up on. Number one is the publication of this particular article by Dr. Ann Kaulakian. It's called the 7 Foundational Principles of Security and Privacy by Design, where she talks about being proactive, not reactive, ensuring that privacy is a default setting of any application and embedding privacy into the design of an ecosystem. She also talks about ensuring that you provide full lifecycle protection by offering end-to-end security and not security of only one specific component. She also talks about visibility and transparency and the respect for user privacy. So going and reading up on the 7 foundational principles of privacy by design is a good starting point to give you an idea of why security and privacy is very critical to the core of any ecosystem. The other person I would like to give a shout out to is Drummond Reed. He's a very good friend of mine, And he's written this book on self-sovereign identities and verifiable credentials. It's a great book to read, and he has gone into details of what self-sovereign identities really mean, what verifiable credentials really mean, and how they play a very important role in the digital identity ecosystem. So apart from Dr. Ann Kaulakian and Drummond Reed, I would say there's also an online tool called BlockGeeks, and BlockGeeks offers a lot of courses on blockchains. You can in fact learn a lot, and most of the courses are free. I think it was founded by Dmitry Buterin, who is a very good friend of mine, lives around 15 minutes from my house. And coincidentally, he is also Vitalik Buterin's dad, who is the founder of Ethereum. So BlockGeeks is a great platform for you to go and learn about blockchains, about biometrics, about tokenization, and about smart contracts. So there are tons of resources online, especially today, where you can go and learn more about these ecosystems. And in fact, there are also tons of WhatsApp groups on the same topic.
That's amazing. Rohan, as usual, just a fascinating discussion with you. I so much appreciate you taking time to talk to me today. We're going to have you back soon, because the conversation could just go longer. I could talk to you for hours about this. But thank you so much for sharing your time today. I very much appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Michael. And you have a great weekend ahead of you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.